When did we decide to take a stand? Let's talk about it. And so, what I mean by that is, all of these things that are going on around us. You've got the flock cameras, which I've talked about, the AI data centers that are using mass resources have popped up all over the place. I listened to a whole episode today with Aaron Brakovic. I don't know the woman, but apparently she's a well documented journalist for people who are probably older than me that know about Hinkley, California, where they apparently had some kind of toxic poisoning in their water. Um, and yeah, I mean, you listen to these stories constantly over and over. There's been land grabs for public land, um, not to mention that the dollar has been debased beyond imagine. And I had a weird thought today for myself that I may just be associated with people who are too successful to give a shit about society, I guess. Like, I just, none of my friends really give a fuck about any of this kind of stuff. Um, and it feels, I don't know, I don't want to say lonely, but I feel isolated maybe, unintentionally, because these are the things that I care about. I wouldn't care, um, if I was making $150,000 a year or, a lot of money. We're talking about civil liberties and rights and things like that, and this is stuff that I take very, very seriously. Um, there are fundamentals that were created and built this country and that were set down by the individuals who created this country and to be honored and revered as the way and functionality of our society, this one specifically, you know um and I don't get the calls to just welcome anyone into this, whether they're rich, whether they're really smart. This has a culture that needs to be protected. There's nothing like it. Nowhere else in the world do they have free speech, freedom of press, free assembly. You could look at Gaza for that, where they've killed over 200 some odd journalists and or didn't let them in because they didn't want people to see what they're doing. And this is Israel, our greatest ally, as it's been referred to. But they're not the only ones. And if you go throughout history and look at, Mao Zedong, Joseph Stalin, those are just two references um, of, this sort of destructive culture that wasn't protected. They may have started as something good, maybe a for the people thing, but that always devolves. So we have um, amendments to our Constitution, Bill of Rights, that are inalienable and are guaranteed to us by being born in America as citizens. And it just, I don't know, there's a weird thing where um you kind of history repeats itself, right? So you're seeing, or I'm seeing currently, people that, they go one of two directions. What can I do? Like, who am I? Which I get the feeling, like I have that feeling too. Nobody really watches this shit. Um, but this is, I guess, like a personal diary for me. This is instead of writing it down, I record my thoughts, and hopefully someone out there resonates with them. Um, but yeah, like not a lot of people see this, if any at all. Um, but regardless, I'm still exercising my right. I still believe in the right to the free speech aspect of it, even if no one cares to hear my voice or really cares what I have to say. That's not the point. I still believe in the liberty of it. I still believe in the idea of it, you know. And we're going by the wayside through either, like I said, there's two ways this goes. You're either so overwhelmed that you don't feel as though you can make a difference. Who am I, right? That's the question. Who am I? But I think everyone starts there. Who am I to make a proclamation, to enforce an idea, or try to rally people around a talking point? Who am I? Why do people care? But I don't think that that's really the point. I think the point is to be a mouthpiece for people. Um, that's what I would look at myself as, you know. Hopefully someday I gain a strong following. That would be great. But regardless, I see a lot of individuals that share like-minded opinions, with ideas that I have, um, as far as against flock, against government overreach. The destruction and debasement of the dollar based on government overreach. Stuff like that that's really important, that has eroded our ability to live a life that is, um, within the, um, I can't remember if it's the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, but I want to say the Constitution is that, every person has the right to, life, love in the pursuit of happiness, or life, liberty in the pursuit of happiness. I think the other one is a gay quote women put on decorations, and the other one is actually part of our Constitution. Either way, um, I think that that's the whole point, and that's where Congress loses it, for me especially, is that they forget they're a mouthpiece and they become about the individual. They become about their own successes, and they forget that the only reason they're there is because of the constituents. But that's because they only look at you as a stepping stone, right? You are just another individual to add to the bucket. They don't really care about what happens to you. At least most of them. There's probably a few good Congress, people that care about what happens to their constituents, but those people are overwhelmed by the amount of people who don't care at all about what happens to us. Um, and so that's kind of the first tier. The second tier is people who actually are successful within the system we have, and they have kind of so much going on in their own lives, um, that they don't either have the desire or the time, or a combination of both, to really lean into social issues or political issues, because those things aren't directly affecting their ability to live. In fact, they have been no hindrance to their ability to live, other than the excessive tax rate that they probably pay on the funds that they make. But their actual income tax rate hasn't impacted their life to a point where they can't do the things they want and live the way they want, and so on and so forth. And most of my friends are like that. I'm probably the poorest of my friends, and I'm not even really poor. Me and my wife do just fine. Uh, but I'm not part of that, upper middle class. I'm probably lower middle class, as far as my income. And that's, what I was raised on. I think my dad was middle class, my mom was middle class. Um, so yeah, they just can't be bothered, maybe. You don't really notice an issue until it's at your front door. That's why I think it's so important to talk about this stuff, and I listen to people all day who talk about this kind of stuff, um, that really have the ability to emphasize the stuff, that we all really should be paying attention to. They sneak in this stuff under your nose, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, you live in a surveillance state where they can tap your phones. And if you're Edward Snowden and you expose it all, you could get pretty much banned to Russia, or you'll come back and get a lifetime fucking prison sentence. For what exactly, other than exposing the bullshit of the government? And that's just, I don't know, that's the reality of where we're at. That's why it's super important to stand up and voice your opinion, to do it locally, because that's where it starts. Um, Lately, more and more, it's really funny because my aunt would always say that she could see me like doing something political, and I thought about like, how do I get into city council, like in my town and stuff like that, to foray into it, just because I think it's really important. Um, and I don't know necessarily how to go about that, or what would be necessary, or even if it's achievable, but I'm going to um, look into it at least for myself. But that's so I hope that I have an ability to bring more to people that they could be concerned about. But the thing I think that really concerns me is that what the boomers did, what our grandparents did, to our parents, but really to us. And that's the part I think if you're a successful individual who makes a lot of money. My brother makes 200 some odd $1,000 a year. I've got a really good friend who makes $150,000. A couple of my friends make 100,000 or a little bit above. And I'm over here and I make like 45 maybe. Which is fine. Like I don't need to be rich. The only thing I would want it for is to travel, to be able to experience other cultures that I don't like get here. Japan, Italy, places like that. But an abundance of wealth doesn't necessarily lead to an abundance of happiness, right? So I don't want them to sell their children upriver because as hard as it may be now, it's only going to get more difficult if you don't take a stand of some kind. If you don't necessarily put your foot down and say, Blanche, stop it. If you don't put your foot down and say, like, no, we're not accepting AI data centers burning through resources, tripling the cost of our utilities, and potentially leaving us resource scarcity just because of the amount of power, because we've got some rich people who want to push forward because no matter what, they'll hoard the resources. I mean, what does this turn into? Mad Max? And we're all the poor people in the desert waiting for Immortan Joe and the misfits up top who somehow obtained power to give us water, trickles of water that we then fight over, or food scarcity, which would become an issue. Um, all of these things are real possibilities if we don't protect ourselves. And if you don't see it for yourself, you have to see it for your children. And that's the part that I think confuses me the most about people who are like, well, I just don't really care, or like, I don't really. And it's like, I'm not asking you to be as impassioned as I am. I understand that. I don't have children and I don't plan on it. And so this is kind of the thing I felt myself gravitated towards recently in the last couple years to really put a stamp on it and try to make my opinion known as well as try to like gather people. I guess that's really the whole point here is to hope to gain an audience of people that share like-minded views so then we can use that audience to influence things in a positive way for, the conglomerate, us, the people. It's always that redneck joke, and even I cringe at it when someone puts "We the People" on their truck windshield, right? It's a little cringy, and it's kind of like, it's just not, so you go, a little trashy. Usually a white dude in a truck, maybe either run down or like decked out, one of the two. Um, but he has a point. Maybe he doesn't understand it fully. Maybe he's someone who supports the Iran war and doesn't really understand why we the people is so important. But we the people is important. It's the first three words of the Constitution for a reason. Because this is what this country is about. They do not function without us. And I think so many people lose that sight of that. Um, this Iran war has failed because people refuse to support it. Failed, because we won't put ground troops in. Is essentially you can't do a regime change from the air. And we can't get them to capitulate entirely from the air either. We would have to dominate and take over their country, and nobody in this country has the stomach for that, nor do we want to go to another pointless war that's going to cost trillions of dollars and debase the currency even further. Until what? We're on pace with the peso? Um, so yeah, I just worry that by the time, as history has shown, that it's time to take a stand, um, the bars on the cages will already be in place, and you know, a few will slip through, and those who have the means will be able to protect themselves and insulate themselves from the real problems. But as with all empires, the slaves end up outweighing the slave owners. And the term wage slave is not necessarily incorrect. We don't, and our parents accepted this willingly, and I really think this is just a fucked up, weird idea, that you only get to enjoy 20 years of life. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I think that's the one part the Europeans got correct is, like, they have a shit ton of sick leave and, like, time to go on vacation, like you've seen with the World Cup when they came here and they've been here for, several weeks. Could you imagine taking 2, 3 weeks off of work? That you could even get approved for that time off, let alone actually taking the time off without PTO to cover it? But they have the PTO to cover it. Not to mention their maternity leave is better. All those things that provide a work-life balance, we do not have that here, and that's fine because it breeds institutional success. But at what point does the institutional success become moot? How many things can you have? How much materialism and money can you grasp at before you realize that, like, that's not the point? Like, the point is to enjoy what people can build and create, and art is really the point of life, and not liberal arts where it's bullshit like transing kids or all that kind of dumb shit, that the far left extreme tries to yell about, or the far right conservatism that thinks that, like, the art of God and the Bible is the structure to your life. And I tend to lean more to the conservative structure because it provides a better structure. But both are incorrect in terms of them being the absolute answer. There's a mixture somewhere in there of being, fiscally conservative and socially liberal. Um, and that's all to say that this weird state that we're entering, where the world is going to look vastly different. We are in our version of the Industrial Revolution. But thankfully, we have the internet to try to emphasize and put our points of view across so people can connect and stop this weird benevolent dictatorship where they're not using force, but they're using the laws and the system they've put in place to um, forcibly coerce individuals that hold positions of power, because we are a republic, to do things that would not benefit the constituents of said position of power. The localities, the municipalities, they will all suffer at the hands of the ones up top. Um, and I don't believe in socialism as an economic system. It's stupid. I've said that on this podcast. But I do believe that what we are experiencing is socialized capitalism. And it's really funny to me because they keep talking about racing China, but what are we racing China to? We're becoming we're becoming more like the communist state instead of trying to influence others to be more freedom loving like we have been. And so that's more or less what concerns me at this point, to race to AI, to create this surveillance state that we become, the UCP, the United Communist Party, or the USCP, the United States Communist Party. Like, how far off are we from that, really? When the people at the bottom don't have the ability to influence the decisions of the people up top, you know? And it's always been a big thing about not being communist and this or that, but is it really that big a deal to them anymore? Are they all just democratic socialists who believe in, like, a communist dictatorship, because of how their struggle for power has conflicted themselves? And they're slowly doing that in our faces, and some of us are waking up to it, but there's a large demographic of individuals that aren't paying attention, and I worry that those are the people that we will need to pay attention. Those are the most successful people in this society. The people that aren't the tip top 0.01%, but the 1%. We need them. Whether you like it or not, you need them because they have the ability to pull together resources because they're closer to us than they are to them. They can, talk to us and we would be more, closely aligned than the people at the very top would be. So, I don't know. I guess I just worry um, that my nieces and nephews and anybody else's children really are going to be walking into some weird dystopia where medically assisted suicide is a choice that many people make. Um, you'll be deprived of resource availability and maybe be given ration cards, and you'll basically never get to experience America as it was originally intended. That's my true fear, is that this brilliant, beautiful thing that we've built took 250 years. How many years does it take to destroy it? 5, 10? The jury's out on that, but it doesn't feel like it'd have to be a lot. And we're too busy with subscription services and video games and all that other stuff. And I get it, you need a release, but at some point you got to come to contention with the fact that your livelihood, your ability to provide, is slowly being taken from you. Your rights, your inalienable rights, are slowly under attack. And that's all they have to do. It just has to be slow. Gradual enough that you don't make enough noise, but with enough effective change that the rug is slipping, but you're still walking forward so you don't see it pulling out. But, you know, fuck it. I still got to go to work tomorrow, and so do you. So that's what we got for this episode. I appreciate anybody who tuned in and listened to the 3 people that probably heard this. Welcome. Thank you for listening to the Average American Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Tate. Have a good weekend.